Durag Diaries, yo, what's good, people? Welcome back to Spur-of-the-moment. And today we are here, as it's in the name, to talk about what's going on at our club at this moment in time. International break ahead of us. A nice, well, for me and I suppose most Spurs fans, a few weeks off away from football, away from games, away from, not celebrating, but talking about losses. But today we have to do it because there was just a game yesterday. There was a result. There was some fixtures what not too many people were happy about. But before we get into any of that, I am joined today by my very special guest. His third appearance on the show now, starting to become a bit of a regular in the last couple of weeks. Spotlight on Spurs is his channel. He's getting it all set up, but it's in the name of the video, so you can show some love. Drop a subscribe over there. Make sure you're ready for when he does start to release. But Luke, how you doing, my bro?
I'm all good, mate. I'm all good. Third appearance, hat-trick ball on that, yeah?
Yeah.
Can't complain.
So a few good appearances off the bench, and now he's starting today. He's earned his start, you know.
All that ANGE rotation, is that what you mean?
We're gonna get that. Is that rotation the right options? Is that the right choices? He's gonna have some words about that. But outside of Spurs, you know, international break. Are you looking forward to it? Do you watch much of England and stuff like that?
I normally watch it with a bit of Spurs intent, having a look at players and this, that, and the other. But normally, I think recently we've kind of not really had many players in it, so it's kind of been like, I'm glad they can rest. I remember before, back in the day when we used to have like 5, 6, 7 players, and I'm watching it thinking, please don't get injured, don't like. Do you know what I mean? So a little bit less interested this time around, I think. How about you?
Yeah, no, I agree. No, I'm really not an international football person. I think when I grew up, my family's like got Italian in them, so I supported Italy. Just I knew they were the better team, and it was one of the ones. I'm growing up, I was like, I know Italy's better. Let me choose the right side, and then they won the World Cup at 06. I was like, yeah, this side's better. This side's better. But you know, naturally, you always have that affiliation to England, and you try to like show some. But when there was that time when they didn't qualify for the Euros, and was it 2008? You know, Croatia knocked them out of the qualify. That's when I was like, I could never support this club, like this nation. They got knocked out by Croatia, who were rubbish and dead at that point. I think they only had a few players. It's like, yeah, done for me. So just like you, whenever I have watched England, whenever I've tuned into international break, it's to see what's going on with Spurs players. I might watch like a Sweden game because Kulusevski's playing or something like that. I'm only keeping an eye out for Spurs players trying to do some scouting. But yeah, no, this international break, I won't be tuning. I'm looking forward to the Tottenham.
So on the international scene, you had a couple of choices and you went with a better one. You must not have had any other choices with Spurs then, because you could have picked anybody else. And
you know what? I generally like I've sat here and even now like I tried to think of how I became a Spurs fan, but I don't remember. All I know is I've always been a Spurs fan. Like I've watched football from 4, 5 years old, and I have memories like 04, 05, but I already knew by then I was a Spurs fan. So it must be one of those things from baby. I was ready in Spurs kicks. It's the only thing I knew, the only color. So yeah, like my older brother was an Arsenal fan and stuff, but it's just I chose the right one.
Against the grain, yeah. I like it.
Against the grain, we chose the right side. But talking about Spurs, you know, 15th in the table right now. It's not a good time. It's definitely we're looking at one of our worst seasons in the history. As in the Premier League, our worst season obviously was 19 defeats. We're now on 15 defeats. Let's just take it back to the start of the season. I know, Luke, that when we spoke before, you didn't expect to get into the top 4. So you naturally there would have been a regression from last season. But where was your head at with the preseason? What did you expect after you saw that summer transfer window? And yeah, what was your expectation of the team and compared to where it is now?
Maybe I'm alone in this, but I always have 2 different predictions. I always have what my head's telling me, and then I have what my heart's telling me. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I look at the teams above, and you think, oh, if they slip up, like Villa, I thought would struggle this year. I didn't think they'd be flying like they were. So then you think, oh, that's a creeping into the top 4 there. But then your head then goes, hang on, let's how many other teams are going to improve? How many other teams are going to get better? So I'd have said anything between 6th. I thought 6th was probably a realistic target that we should be trying to get to. But I always felt that if we got a 5th, 6th, or 7th, that was round about where we would end.
No, that's fair. 5th or 7th for me. I always thought that at the start of the season, like you said, the heart was telling me if everyone else is about, we could do top four, like maybe fourth. We could peak to the fourth, but we'd need to have a very, very, very good season to be in fourth. Like it was gonna have to be a flawless one where we didn't have all the injuries. And after it was either the Palace or the Ipswich game, one of those, I just remember it being early sort of October-ish. I was like, nah, there's no chance. We at that point, I think we had like 4 wins, 2 or 3 defeats, 2 draws. So it wasn't a terrible start to the season, but it was very inconsistent. As in, there was games where you felt like we should have got over, but we didn't. Some performances that just were lacking, and a lot of just left a lot to be desired. So at that point, it was like, yeah, maybe 6th or 7th is where we'll fall out. But now where we are in 15th, I can't lie. With injuries or not, I don't think that anyone could have predicted for us to be this bad. Do you think with the injuries that we have, the position that we're at right now is justifiable compared to your start of the season expectations? So you're saying 7th, 8th. Do you think with all the injuries, this is about right? Or do you think that we should fall, I suppose, a few places upwards?
We shouldn't be where we are. We should have definitely picked up more points. And that there's a responsibility on loads of people for that. Yeah. I mean, and I'm sure we'll go into it, but even a January transfer window, do you know what I mean? Like you get Danzo in 3 weeks earlier, and we could be talking about a different situation here. You're right. At the start of the season, I think it was after 11 games. I think we were somewhere like 8th or 9th, but we were 3 points off 3rd. Yeah. And it was almost like we were a bit of a slow burner to get started, but then we needed to then kick on. And as soon as you needed that bit to kick on, you're then hit by injuries. And I know it's a boring old rhetoric, and I keep hearing the same people. I keep hearing the same kind of noises on Twitter, and it's the worst place in the world for football opinions. But the whole injury situation, it can't be. You can't just disregard that. You can't. It just doesn't make any sense to try and disregard it. It's just like it's unprecedented, the amount of injuries we've had. It's not even just the amount of injuries; it's the key injuries to the with Ange's system. There's very specific players that if they're missing, there's a huge drop off.
Yeah.
And I mean, I know Romero's.
What players do you feel they are? Just you might as well go into them. What players do you feel like those are?
Well, obviously we didn't have Danzo at the start of the season, so losing Romero and Van der Ven, we don't have anyone like him. Dragutin comes in, and for me, he was always more of probably a 3rd choice, almost like you drop to 5 at the back last few minutes, that sort of defender. So there's no like-for-like replacement. Obviously, Van der Ven's like-for-like replacement in theory is Ben Davies. Couldn't be any further from the players.
You saw what happened to him.
Everyone can now say it because it's very easy in hindsight, but no one considered Jed Spence a good, very solid option. Yeah. So you got Udogie and there's no left back, and that was the same as last year. That was one of the reasons why I think we're struggling at this moment in time in terms of the balance of the squad. And then Solanke, the only kind of option you've got bar Solanke is Richarlison, who's out as well. And I think that when everyone was kind of slating Ange for playing Tell through the middle, so it didn't have an option. It was either him or Son. And I think if he had a Richarlison in there, I'm not saying he's going to take you to another level, but he can do what Solanke kind of offers. Do you know what I mean? So if you don't have them sort of, and then obviously going back to even forgetting about it, but Vicario, losing him and then having Forster as your second keeper, there's just so many holes in this squad where you just take one out and all of a sudden it just falls apart.
And I think you're definitely right there. When we talk about taking players out, and for one, Solanke, key signing in the summer. I think the only player that we actually signed to improve our 11 has been, we've seen throughout the season how key he has been to the system, just piecing the puzzles together in that forward line, dropping in deep, sort of being the key to the cog in the hold-up play, because there's been so many times, like you said, when Tell comes in and you're just like, there's no one to get the ball up to, there's no focal point, no one that can hold up the play and just slow the possession down for a few seconds. And he's definitely been a huge miss. The one thing that I suppose we could say is that the squad was always apparent that the squad wasn't good enough or big enough. But one thing that you do have to do as a manager is make do with that squad and try find solutions. We see that with many managers this season. Even Arsenal, just this, you're seeing Moreno play up top, and Arteta putting him in striker, and he's now got 4 goals. Now, some people could sit there and say he's just a bit lucky, but also it is a manager. He's finding solutions to problems that he's that's come his way. Do you think that ANGE has done good enough job in finding solutions during those injuries? And because we have seen he did make a few, I think it is very unfair, like say on Twitter, when people go, oh, he only plays the same tactics, he only plays the same way, which naturally the system, or I should say the build-up, is going to be the same way because that's how he wants. He has a certain patterns of play that he's coaching the team, and they're always going to play, but the tactics have changed. There has been adaptations. Do you think that the adaptations have been good enough? And would you question, again, his coaching as to whether he's found good enough solutions with the players that he has at his disposal?
Yeah, I think it's hard to really judge, especially when you're sort of playing like an Archie Gray at centre-back in terms of what tactic suits him being at centre-back. It's a difficult one. And as I said, that you're right in terms of there's been so many different changes and variations to the tactic, but I keep hearing that his tactics he hasn't got any tactics is what I'm hearing. Not that he's got one, is that he hasn't got any. But no, I definitely think if you had a more adaptable manager, let's say I'm sure we'll bring up his name in a little while, but you're kind of Marco Silva's, your Thomas Franks. If they had this squad during the injuries, they would have probably picked up a little bit more points. But saying that, would they have progressed in Europe is a big, because that's one of the reasons I think we probably picked up as many points in Europe as we did during the league. So it's, would they have been able to get that level of performance in Europe?
Yeah, I think that's fair. We saw last season that ultimately we did perform better when we didn't have Europe and we didn't have so many games to play. We obviously got to 5th place, and I think we finished at this point in the season anyway. We was on around 55 points, so we would have been on track to be having in this Premier League season a fairly good year. But we have fallen some way short of that. Well, quite a lot short of that at the moment.
Massively.
And I want to just talk about, so going through the season up until now, has there been any point of where you got worried or you've identified in your life? Because you said going into that January transfer window, I think Spurs were in a very tricky position because we already knew we had all those injuries for that month of December. So during that month, a lot of us had accepted a lot of the results that had come our way. But Ange did come out and he said he's looking for more experience. He's looking to bring in some players that can, just boost the squad's level of experience in a lot of these games. So I feel like he pointed out in some of these games, they're just missing that tactical maturity and sometimes the people to see out those games because we kept conceding some late goals in the last 10 or 15 minutes, giving us issues. What did you think of that approach, like you said, to the January transfer window? Because we only signed Danso as an experienced player, and then the 2 other players we brought in were young. But Ange consistently comes out and backs the board and backs the decisions made by that.
I think it's a tough one. I think we're turning around and expecting a manager to come out and do a Conte, and it just don't happen. Conte was sacked because of the way that he was in public. So you almost got to read a little bit into the conversations. And I think I come on here last week and said something similar. But he clearly came out and he said at the pre-season tour that he wanted another centre-back in, and we didn't get another centre-back in. He then mentioned in January that he needed some experienced people to come in and help the young group of players. And as you said, we signed Danso at the end of the window. I'm going to give everyone, I guess, at the club a buy on Tell, because I don't think Tell was available in January. It's easy to be Football Manager FIFA and be like, yeah, let's get them in there, just sign them up, whatever it is, give an extra 10 million, whatever that may be. But with Danso, I feel like if they wanted, they could have got him earlier. And also, as you say, January is a very reactionary window. It is more expensive. People tend to spend money when things are going wrong. But that is exactly it. They spend money when things are going wrong, and it was going wrong. We didn't have players. We didn't have experience. And as I say, right from the start of the season, when you look at the actual summer window, as you said it earlier, we signed 1 player to improve our 11. That's it. You can sign as many squad players as you like, but we had 1 player that improved our 11. We signed the keeper, obviously. I think the keeper.
You feel Ange was hard done by then, because by the way you're wording it is like Ange was hard done by in the summer transfer window, not just January, but the summer transfer window initially kicked this all off because we only signed one starting player, and he also wanted that all action midfielder, they said, as well as potential centre back.
Yeah, I definitely think so. Again, another theme is that Ange has been fully backed because of the money spent. But when you're signing the amount of young players we are, they're clearly signing them for 2-3 years down the line. Yeah. So I definitely feel like in terms of being backed, he was backed 50-60%. And the players that they've signed, and I'm not necessarily saying the players they've signed are not good, but they should have been accompanied with other players. Do you know what I mean? I think everyone, if they're realistic, even if the most optimistic person would be sitting there thinking there was quite clear gaps that needed to be filled in the summer.
Yeah.
And then even more so in the winter when you've got that many injuries. To, like, as you said, we're not an Arsenal or a City where you go, it's really difficult to improve this 11. Like, it's really, really difficult. We're not in that position. We're not in that. I think we was on the potch. I think we had a lot of players where you think, unless you go and get the Messis and Ronaldos of the world, who's actually going to come in and improve us? Whereas now, you've got players all over the pitch that could be improved. So I think that they let him down partially in the summer, and then in the winter, I think he was massively let down. And as I say, I think if you read his press conferences, if you read into his comments at the press conferences, he quite clearly states what he wants, and we didn't get him in. So that whole he said he's backed and he's accepted and he's 100% with every signing we've made. He might be, but I still think that he wanted more than that as well.
I would agree. As someone who's still like, I am Ange out at this point, but I do agree. I think one thing that I was consistent on and why I gave Ange so much time as opposed to so many people was because I did feel that. I felt like he wasn't backed. I don't feel like in the summer we necessarily signed the players that he wanted to sign because, all prior to January, prior to the actual window itself, so in June, July, the players that we were being briefed for the whole of the month, the Pedro Neto, Eze, Conor Gallagher, these types of players were all the ones that Spurs were targeting to improve their attack, improve their midfield. We never got any of them in. And then we ended up bringing complete downgrades on them all because, let's have it right, as much as Archie Gray is a very good prospect, he is a downgrade from Conor Gallagher. The exact same for Odegaard in signing Odegaard over Eze and Pedro Neto. So I think it's clear to see that the level of the caliber of player that we went for had dropped massively, and that's where the issue was. Is that I think for me, Ange had come out and defended it in saying that every player he brings through, he gives the green light to. Which, yeah, I get that. For a manager, you will naturally give the green light to every player that you're bringing through, but it is also justifying the board's behavior in bringing because he come out and said he wants young players. He wants them because they're more impressionable. They're going to pick up tactics and learn more things, and they ain't already going to have this way of thinking of playing, and there's no right way to it. So when I look at it, I'm just like, he was hard done by, but I just think the consistent backing from him of the board is where he's probably finding himself having an issue with fans in particular. Maybe not the Spurs club or the board, but with the fans, because even now, when we look at some of the incidents that are happening and just coming out, he's biting back at the fans. He already bit back at the fans last year after that Manchester City game. He was like, the mentality and so on and so forth. And quite a few incidents have happened. So now I feel like it's breaking down his relationship because he's coming out in press conferences saying one thing and he's backing the board. They already know the board is not in a good light right now. When you talk about January and talk about the way they played out, Ange said he wanted to bring players in early. Typical Spurs fashion, they wait until the end of the window to bring players in. But then he will come out and continuously back it throughout the window and say, they're trying hard. I feel like sometimes, of course, I get what he's doing. As a man, he's trying to make it look like, we're all in one house. Everything in-house is fine. But it is making himself have a bigger target on his back. Because when things aren't working now, it's like, well, you said this, Ange. Well, you did also say this. Now you did also say this. The board didn't do enough in January to back Ange. And, I mean, that's not his fault. But his fault is to put the target on his own back. Now that we've played out through January, we had some terrible performances in January. We built on from that, 3 games, where we got 3 wins in the Premier League, and then it's back to this 3 games of no win. So the chop and change and all of this ups and downs doesn't go in his favor. But I do totally understand where you're coming from with regards to the backing from the board, the backing of him in particular. But I need to understand, Luke, though, because when you watch these games, don't you think tactically there are issues even with our best team available? So when you look back, let's just say the start of the season, the first 6 or 7, 8 games where we had our players available, and then probably the last 4 or 5 games where we haven't had all of them available, but we've had the options of doing the rotations and they've been there or abouts. Do you not sense some of the problems in the way we build up, the way that we attack, the way that we defend, like the structural issues itself?
Yeah, I think, and this is where I try and become a little bit more balanced. I've seen some incredible takes on Twitter. As I say, it's the worst place to look, but I've seen people that are ANGE in saying that anyone that don't want ANGE don't deserve to celebrate European trophy if we get it. It just doesn't, like, there has to be a little bit of balance there. Do you know what I mean? No one, well, I hope not. I hope no one's sitting there saying that what's gone on is acceptable, where we finish is acceptable, and if it happens next year, it's acceptable. I don't think there's anyone out there that says where we are is good enough. There's been loads of things that are not good enough. And I think that's the kind of, I'm looking at it now, seeing probably in January it was very Levy, it was all at him. Then now it seems to have switched a little bit, and now it all seems to be on ANGE. Everything seems to be on ANGE, and it's like, I don't see, like, what we was just discussing. We could have had that same conversation about not being backed last year. We could have had it maybe the year before, probably the year before. And this is my point, is that things are not changing at the club. Like, this isn't ANGE's come in and it's something new. The only difference really between him and the last 3-4 managers is a Kane. That's literally the difference. I was looking at Kane's stats today, and they're just ridiculous, man. To score 30 Premier League goals in a Tottenham side that was nowhere near the top is just ridiculous. And I know, again, people are going to go, "Oh, that's an excuse," but we've been beaten by Fulham and by Liverpool by more than 1 goal. They're the only 2 clubs that have done it. So if you had a Kane in there and he notched another 10 goals on top of Solanke, that's 10 extra points. Then all of a sudden, the league.
Wait, what was the stat again? Just name that for people. I may have missed that as well. You said 2 games with only Fulham.
No, there's only 2 teams. Only 2 teams that have beat us by more than 2 goals. By more than 1 goal, which is Fulham, obviously 2-0. Liverpool spanked us 6-3 or whatever, and then they beat us. They beat us by more than 2 another game as well. Yeah. But all the rest, they've been by 1 single goal. And everyone's going, "Oh, you're celebrating losses." I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is the difference between with 1 goal is the swing of so many of them losses. And if you've got a star player like Kane or Son in his prime, if he picks up them extra, as I say, 10 goals gets you 10 more points. Yeah, you get 10 more points, and all of a sudden the season don't look as good, don't look as bad. Sorry,
wouldn't we be like still 10th? We'd still be like 10th.
I'm talking with the injuries. With the injuries, if you say you finish that side with all the injuries, losing Romero, like, so, and that's what I think the big difference is that we haven't got anyone really in this side that will bail us out of what we've been.
It's that individual brilliance, isn't it? We're lacking that individual brilliance heavy, but
we haven't got it. Like Kulu is very, very capable. He's very, very capable, but there are so many times where I watch games with Kane and I was like, if he plays well, we're gonna win. And we don't really like.
Not even if he plays well, just give Kane 1 chance. Just give him a chance and he'll score it. It's one of those ones. Just get the ball down to Kane's feet in a good area and he'll finish it. But now,
and even Son to an extent, there's a lot of big games where Kane didn't step up, but Son did. Do you know what I mean? And I just feel like we're missing in so many areas. And it was quite ironic yesterday that Sessegnon was the one that scored the winner, because there was a lot of people that are saying that all of the injuries are purely down to Ange. Sessegnon scores the winner, and how long did he have injuries for? He had a hamstring injury about 5 hamstring injuries a year for about 5 years. So, and this is what I keep going back to, is that these issues that he's brought up or are showing more now in his tenure are not all down to him. They've been there for a long, long time. Yeah. And for whatever reason, things haven't accumulated all at once, for instance. And in terms of the tactics, I don't know whether it's just me being me, but I think Archie Gray yesterday played the 6. He's got more defensive awareness than any of our midfielders. So everyone that I keep hearing tell me he doesn't play with a 6, I couldn't argue with that because there's never a 6 there. But there was yesterday. Archie Gray was caught out a couple of times, don't get me wrong, but he was in the 6 predominantly. So that tells me that if he gets someone with a little bit of defensive awareness, there will be someone who sits slightly better. Bergvall does it, but then he obviously has that youthfulness of just bombing up the pitch and vacating a position. And I think that's the difference, is that if you go and get someone who can do the sitting role and is defensively aware, that I think everything around that whole squad changes. Maybe Conor Gallagher was that guy. I don't think Conor Gallagher's a 6 personally, but maybe that was his idea, was that we get him in there. But it seemed to me that Gray played that position differently to Biss, and he played it differently to Bentancur.
Yeah, he definitely played it a lot differently. I feel like you said, he's more of a natural 6 anyway himself. So when he's picking up those areas, the way he's receiving the ball from the defenders, sort of opening up his body, receiving it on the half turn, always looking forward. He's so calm and composed on the ball. So naturally, I feel like he gives you that extra bit of, calmness in the midfield, because he keeps the possession. He can recycle the ball a lot better than Bissouma or Bentancur do. Then we're actually going to get into the Fulham game in a bit as to how bad those two perform themselves. But I feel like one of the other issues, not just the 6 for me, and I know a lot of people point out the midfield, like the structure of the midfield is a bit of a problem, but that's, like you said, because we maybe don't have the natural profiles of what he's looking for. He's not finding the right solutions. But let's not lie now. We spoke about the other day. We have so many profiles in the midfield. There's so many different players that he should be able to find a way to make it work. Whether it's we just don't have a 6. That's the one thing apparent. We don't have a 6, but you could play with a double pivot and play with 2 6s, and you could work and have a solution. I think where he's so rigid in his especially his formation. That's one of his formations. He is so rigid, and he needs to set them up with this exact formation. That's where the problem lies. Because if you've done a 4-2-3-1, put 2 players in there defensively, I feel like we'd look a lot better automatically. You just put someone in the 10 and give them a bit more of a free roam role. Then you've already got players that are going to be picking up spaces and picking up the ball where they haven't been already. And I think one player that, like you said, we expected to have that individual brilliance that hasn't is Maddison. James Maddison. You touched, Kulu has it sometimes, but I feel like with Kulu there is games where he will control and run the whole game, but there's also games where he sort of drifts out of the game, doesn't really get too involved, and then he'll just get shifted onto the right-hand side, because I feel like with our substitutions, it's very limited with what you can do. With James Maddison, I know the expectation was that he would become that player, but he hasn't ultimately. But there has been a few games like the AZ Alkmaar one last week where you saw he's got the ability. Do you expect maybe under different manager you're going to get a different player? And do you think the problem is with him and Ange? Because apparently there was some friction as to why he was getting taken off so many times. Or do you think, similar to what we've discussed before, that he's just not that player anymore?
I think it's a bit of both. The thing that's always been labelled at Maddison is inconsistency. So he's 28 now, something like that. And if he's played his whole career and he's always been labelled as inconsistent, you can't then again solely put it on the manager for him being inconsistent. I do think that the system sometimes doesn't allow him to be able to do what he wants to do. But it is quite a difficult one with Maddison, because Maddison in some games has looked so good, almost dropping in alongside the 6, picking the ball up from deep. Similar to what he done against AZ, coming in, he's got that turn. But then the other side of that is that you want him further up the pitch.
Yeah.
And again, I think if you then bring in a 6 that's dominant, that's good defensively, maybe Maddison doesn't need or recycles the ball, well, maybe you don't need Maddison there, and therefore he can impact the game further up the pitch. So I definitely think, and what you said about the double pivot, I definitely agree with that. I think Postecoglou definitely could have made changes. And again, I think he could have improved, and we could have got a few more points than what we have through that injury crisis, 100%. And that is rightly so labelled at Ange. Do you know what I mean? Like, I'm not sitting here saying that everything he's done is correct. I'm not sitting here and saying that he wasn't backed at all or anything like that. for me, there has to be some sort of context behind it. There has to be kind of like, as we already alluded to about the whole, he's got no tactics. Well, I can name 5 different things that have shifted from last year to this year, but when people don't care, they don't care about that. It's just that he's got no tactics. Do you know what I mean? We played last year with Son up front. Do you think we're playing the same tactics with Solanke? No, we're not.
That's another thing that I wanted to ask, because I think for me, going forward, that's been a big issue. Is we don't create chances for Solanke, like at all. And I hate when I see Spurs fans or even rival fans come out and say Solanke's only got 7-8 goals. Solanke's been rubbish. Solanke's this. I think Solanke's been, I can't lie, he's not been amazing. But for what we actually need, and when you talk about all-round play, Solanke's been great. Solanke has done his job. Yep. He's done what he's been asked for. But he's just not, we're not creating for him. Do you think that's an issue with our system, that we don't create enough goals for our striker and enough opportunities?
I would say it's an issue at the moment. I would say it's an issue with the profile of player we have. I wouldn't say it's an issue in this team. I think that this team is not like it's like the City now, where everything's geared towards Haaland scoring. If Haaland don't score, they struggle. I think this system is geared for the forwards to score. Every one of them. It's not about everything being fed for one person. Yeah. So when you've got, I think we've got Sonny potentially could have a 30 goal and assist season. Yeah. We've got 4 others that could all go 20 or above 20 goals or assists. So the whole idea is that goals are spread out. But I think it's the profile of player. I mean, the whole idea, and when he's got so many goals, I watched back his whole season and the goals that he scored, and a lot of them were about wingers getting down the sides. Yeah. And cutting it back.
Cutting it back on the byline, yeah. He had a lot of those front posts, loads of them.
And Brennan Johnson just, I don't know what it is. I don't know. I know he done his hamstring a few months back, and he just doesn't look like he can run anymore. It's almost like there's an injury there that's just prevented him from running. Even when he's running at full pelt, he don't move. It's like, this guy's quick, and he's not quick when he's running. It doesn't make any sense to me. Yeah. So I think, the only alternative you've got to Brennan Johnson is Kulusevski, and he's then not doing what Brennan Johnson is, or what Brennan Johnson should be doing, i.e. getting to the byline and cutting it back. So I think that there's been a tactic shift from Bournemouth to Spurs. I don't think the wingers are as dynamic as they need to be. I don't think they cut it back. As even Son, I mean, Son's whipped in some very, very good balls, but a lot of them are from deep. So Solanke's good in the air, but we need to create better chances for him. But as I said, I don't feel like Solanke's going to be a striker that's going to score 30, 35 goals. Even if we score them amount of goals, he won't get that amount, because it's about wingers scoring as well. I mean, if you listen to any Spurs fan really, and they talk about our front three, most people want rid of Brennan Johnson. Most people said Son ain't good enough, and yet we're the second top scorers in the league. So the system is obviously geared to score goals, and whoever's in it will score. But I just don't think that at the moment we're playing to Solanke's strengths.
Yeah, no, I don't think we are playing to Solanke's strengths at all. I do have to say, I feel like I think the system could be geared towards a striker scoring goals. I just think it needs 2 wingers that are very creative, that can create for that striker enough, like you said, because when we play with Pedro Porro down the right-hand side, we tend to create more chances for Solanke because he's going to put more crosses in the box. But also, I noticed that the reason we don't put a lot of crosses in the box is because it's usually only Solanke in there by himself. Mm-hmm. And I don't know whether that's, again, by design, whether it's we just don't have any other box crashing midfielders, because again, the players we've been playing as of recent don't tend to do that. But if you had someone like a Conor Gallagher or someone within that ilk, James Maddison does it sometimes when he receives the ball on the edge of the box, but someone who's always going to create an option for that cutback. But we saw that so often, like say at Bournemouth, with him being an option for those cutbacks. A lot of his goals coming at that near post. I feel like we just need to create to the byline a bit more. If you get wingers that play like an Odebert, when he played on the right-hand side on the weekend, like you just get them beating their man down the side that they're more comfortable at. Against then they can do the cutbacks. They can do the cutbacks byline rather than trying to do the inside stuff, because far too often in modern day football, everyone wants to be inside forward. Everyone wants to be the next Bell or Robin who can cut it to the other side and shoot. Like, no one's got that today. We feel like we just need to take it back a couple steps and just do the basic thing. So I'd like to see that and from our wingers and from our wing play, but I think we are just need an upgrade on those things, which we're going to go into in a second. But big up to Raiden. Because Jose got sacked before a final. Let's not pretend they don't throw every manager under the bus to stay in mediocrity. And the fans are the bus. It's time to stick with a manager. I hear you, Raiden. I definitely hear why you want to stick with the manager, and I'm not against why people would want to, but the performances do need to be justified. And like Ange just come out and said, 15th place just is not good enough. So I don't want to keep saving this fact that he might win a trophy. And if you are a fan that thinks he's only staying if he wins Europa League, then you might. I don't think Spurs are going to win Europa League this season. We are typically top best to win the Europa League, and if you're one of those fans that are relying on Europa League to save his job, please don't be that guy. Just say you're in with the Ange project. But Jay Simpson's Jords, this club. Oh my God, this club. I didn't even bother watching the game. I was watching Arsenal instead. Jay, that is shameless. You're my guy, but that is shameless. You can't be watching Arsenal instead of watching Spurs. Don't get me wrong. Both games are horrible to watch because I had both of them on at the same time. But watching Arsenal over Spurs is crazy. But big up to Tony Rodriguez. Solanke has one good season. He's bang average. Wouldn't start any of other so-called top 6 clubs. And out. That's strong words, man. Strong words. Solanke is not 65 million. And this what is the point? Werner does more. He's dead. Spurs win my week at some point every single week. People are
not this week. Not this week. They're not going to ruin you this week because there's no Spurs.
Good week off. We got Chelsea the week after, so I wasn't going to say the week after as well. Like, no, definitely not. But big up to Mr. Udang. Says big up Jords and Luke, 100%. Xavi in and out. The Xavi in train is picking up. It's definitely picking up. And just really quickly, Boris says Odegaard creates a lot of chances. The type of winger that gives Solanke so many chances. What's great to see. He does give him a few. I feel like Odegaard could do more, but he's a bit raw. The final ball is still lacking, but he's building. He's going to get there eventually. And George, rubbish. We sold Kane for 80 to 85 million, paid 65 for slow Lanky. We got robbed on both sides. I don't know if we got robbed for Solanke. The price was always going to reflect the fact that he was English and he was a homegrown player. So you always have to take that into consideration. He's probably around a £40 million player. But his all-round game for me is pure outside of just scoring goals. So if we do eventually get to a point where we focus on creating chances for him, because I think Solanke doesn't even average one shot a game, because there's so many games I see Solanke doesn't have a shot. And if he does have a shot, it tends to be a deflection or something that's just a transport for him. He's been hard done by. If there's anyone that's been hard done by at Spurs, most definitely Dominic Solanke this season. But you spoke on it very briefly. We touched on it. Fulham at the weekend, 2-0. I think it's fairly. It was fair to say Fulham deserved to win the game. We didn't do enough. But what was your thoughts on that performance, Luke, man?
Yeah, I think well, first of all, with the team selection, I wasn't entirely surprised. Maybe you could argue I was surprised that he selected the same 3 that had no creativity the week before, but I wasn't surprised that he didn't play as many players as I mean, again, going off Twitter and some of the reactions. I mean, I've seen why didn't Mickey van der Ven play? I've seen why didn't Son play? And I'm thinking, if you'd have played them and then they'd have got injured, you'd have moaned and said he should never have played them. And this is the problem. And it's actually funny what he said about hindsight. I know a lot of people disregarded a lot what he said and thought what he said in press conference was nonsense, but I thought that was actually key. And I've said this before. I said, if you was to actually tell to a lot of people that are ANGE out, they'll either say to them, what team would you select before the game? They'll either say, I don't care. Or they would probably select a very similar team, but then they wouldn't be able to then slag him off for the team selections. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like when I looked at Van der Ven and when I see some people saying that he should have played him, I just thought I went and had a look through the stats, and it was something like, I think he missed 8, came back for 1 against Chelsea, I think it was, then missed 14, then came back against it's a training game, wasn't it? Who did we play? Where they didn't even move. Yeah. And then ever since then, he missed 6, then he played 30, 60, and that was within 3 days of each other. So there was no way he was going to play. yesterday. There's no way. And soon as him and Romero are not there, there's just a huge gap. Even when you actually look at it now, who started, you've got Romero. Obviously, he came off, and then it was Gray and Davies. And you could argue now that they've dropped even further. They were 4th and 5th choice. They're now probably 5th and 6th. So that's where we was at, and we conceded chances. There's no real surprise on that, but it wasn't good enough. I was expecting there to be more energy, but I actually called it in my group chat. I literally said that Maddison and Son will probably be on after 60, 65 minutes. He'll try and basically shut up shop and try and be quite pragmatic in the approach, keep it tight, and then the last 30 kind of go for it. And then obviously they nick that goal, and then the second one just comes of everyone pushing up the pitch to kind of thing. So yeah, again, not good enough, but in the grand scheme of things, I think we even had a little exchange on Twitter. It's just that there's no creativity in there. When you're missing Kulu, you're missing Maddison, Son to an extent, Porro to an extent. It was never going to.
Do you think Maddison should have started, especially considering the fact he didn't get called up for England? He's going to have 18 days off. I know he played midweek, but he also got subbed off a bit early midweek as well. So like, you thought, yeah, maybe he could start this one. Like, he should have enough in his legs to at least start and then potentially be taken off at the hour mark if needed.
Yeah, he was the one that you could probably say. And again, went back, had a little look at the last 4 games that he's played, and he's effectively been playing about 90 to 100 minutes a week. So it looks to me like Ange is either carrying something, and then he's got effectively 2 weeks to kind of manage that because he's not with England. Yeah. But he's effectively, his minutes have been something along the lines of 70-30, 70-30. So maybe he's carrying something. But yeah, that's the one where you could be like, he could have probably started. Son, there's absolutely no way he could have played. Porro, I think, was the other one who's played more games than anybody. Van der Ven was never going to play. So there's 4 of your changes before you've even looked at the rest of the team. So, but again, we shouldn't be beaten 2-0 and against Fulham. But again, flipping it the other way, there's quite clearly a penalty. Solanke misses a decent chance. I think Bentancur missed a decent header as well. Yeah. And it's these sorts of things just ain't kind of going for us at the moment. You've got to play yourself into a bit of form, and we just haven't managed to do that. So I wasn't entirely surprised. I can't imagine many fans thinking that we would go there and beat Fulham. To be honest, I didn't feel like that was it wasn't like a game where you absolutely should be winning in the form that we're in, but it should be a game that you start looking to be winning games. We should be beating Fulham at home.
We should be. And to put a stat at you, Fulham beat us at Craven Cottage with a clean sheet. And that was last year. This time last year, literally on the same day, 16th of March, 2024. The next time that they beat a team with a clean sheet at Craven Cottage was Spurs again. So Dr. Tottenham did strike. He struck, definitely. He let us know. And we felt it because Ryan Sessegnon, who doesn't score goals, doesn't start for Fulham. We obviously sent him there on a free. We gave him up for free and said, yeah, look, take him off our hands. Come back. And scored, you could say a worldie to some. It sort of was a bit of a worldie. He put Ben Davies on his ass and then wrapped it top bins with his right foot. And at that point, I honestly just turned the game off. Like, as soon as that goal went in, I said, yeah, right. I ain't watching no more. I don't need to see any more of this. Ryan Sessegnon is ending our hopes and letting us know. And like the fact that he didn't, I wanted him to celebrate because I was thinking, yeah, you should celebrate, man. Like, you barely wore a Spurs shirt. Like, in 5 years, what did you have? Like, less than 100 appearances? There's no way he made more than 100 appearances for Tottenham. So I wouldn't even be mad if he celebrated. Like, the way that he went out and stuff, like, it was just unfortunate. A strong time here, but the game itself, I feel like we were always behind for them. They always had more than us. They'd always they beat us to every ball. I feel like we had way too many turnovers in possession. It's like what was on the show previously. I think Henry brought it up and he said just like we have to be playing our absolute best and like that goal against AZ Alkmaar. Every pass needs to be perfect. That's the problem with Spurs. Our football requires everything to be so good that when your football's not working and when the players aren't just clicking, it looks so bad. So we were breaking down our own attacks. We essentially didn't create any good chances. Even those chances you say were decent, one of those corner. The other one was like a flick on. And again, they're not chances that the players were expected to score. They're just decent opportunities that we created, and you can look at and be like, could have put it in, couldn't have, and you're not going to look at it any other way. So the Fulham game was just one that was far too similar to many games this season where we just didn't put in to get the job done. It was very reminiscent of the Crystal Palace and Ipswich games when off the back of a Thursday night, we just don't. And that Thursday, Sunday schedule is quite lit us. Was it refreshing to in the middle, like we talked about? It was refreshing to see him start, but Basuma starting in the advanced state was extremely confusing. Extremely confusing. And I think the interview afterwards from ANGE is damning for Basuma because I think it all but it leads to the fact that Basuma's time is done, don't you think?
100%. The amount of times and what you say about Ange's tactics in terms of everything needs to be perfect. I think everyone needs to be competent on the ball and accept it in dangerous positions. That's one key element. You have to be able to do that. The Maddison turn is the exact prime example of that. And what I find absolutely baffling at this moment in time is that we concede so many chances and look so vulnerable because we give the ball away. And we're not talking about a Bournemouth who are pressing and you've got people all over you and you give the ball away. We give the ball away in the most easy possession phase you've ever seen in your life. The amount of times where the ball was just kicked out of play or you've got a man 2 yards away and they give it away, you can't start winning games with anything like this. And if you want to blame Ange and you want to blame his tactics, then it is what it is. Everyone's got their own opinion. It is what it is. But if a player can't make a 2-yard pass, it don't matter what tactic you're in. You can't be blaming, and that's the problem. Is that even going back to the Porro goal against Bournemouth, and there was absolute outrage that he was so far out of position. He had the ball in such comfortable possession. He was inside his own half. He had no one anywhere near him, and he gives the ball away. And we do that all the time, and it's so frustrating. And as I say, there's so many things that you can say about the tactic, but giving the ball away so cheaply and so easily, when there's no pressure, it's absolutely ridiculous. I think Basuma, Udogie, and Bentancur give it away. Like it must have been at least 6-7 times in the first half.
So that left-hand side just constantly breaking down the attack. For like he had a few good. There was that one good moment where he chopped it inside, beat his man, and I was like, all right, that's what I need to see a bit more of. But the play just kept breaking down whenever it came to his side. So every time he got on the ball, I felt like he was getting overloaded. And then you saw towards the end of the half, Andrew had seen enough. He's like, no, Jed, go out on that left-hand side. We need someone a bit more aggressive, someone who's going to keep
within 10 seconds, he'd burst on the pitch and he changed and the commentator was on what I was watching. The commentator was like, he's done literally more in the last 10 seconds than Destiny has done. And that's as I say, that you can if you don't think the tactics are right, absolutely that's fair. As I say, each to their own. But if you've got experienced players, and I mean, with this, when we signed him, I thought he's on another level. He looked like he was going to come here and dominate. And then Bentancur, I'm going to give him a bit of leeway because since the cruciate injury and then the 2 concussions back to back, he just doesn't seem like he's got the composure. He doesn't seem as sure-footed anymore. And I'm hoping that's more of a form thing. But that midfield that you've got there, Berraval's still young, but if you've got Basuma and Bentancur, if you put them up against midfields, let's use Newcastle as an example.
Newcastle's a heavy one though, man. Newcastle's midfield is probably one, I think chemistry-wise and like cohesive-wise, it's the best in the league. Like,
it's up there, 100%.
Balance, isn't it?
Let's not be unrealistic and say, look, well, let's compare it to a City, say. Let's compare it to the teams around us. Let's say like Villas. Do you know what I mean? How many, and I know someone said about Solanke earlier about him not getting any top 6 teams. I think that's a slightly different one because there are not many great nines around. There's a reason why the Arsenal, Chelsea, or like all the top teams want a 9 because there ain't that many around. Whereas in midfield, you can go and get good profiles. But does Biss and Bentancur start at any? You could even argue top 8. Does he start for Bournemouth? I think
Bentancur has a good argument to start for many, but Bissouma, nah. I think Bissouma could probably. I generally wouldn't be surprised to see Bissouma at a newly promoted side next year or something like that. That would be his level. Like he's not shown anything near of the level he was at Brighton. And I think Bentancur, like I say, arguably there's a few teams that have better midfielders. When you look at like Aston Villa, definitely they got a few players in there that you could say are better. Tielemans look good. Onana's been class this season. And then you start looking at, like I say, Newcastle, they've definitely got a better team. Bournemouth, you could make an argument, but I think Bentancur would slide in there. But no, you made a good point. I think midfield-wise, that's one of the positions where we are lacking, where I think most fans may have thought that we had enough in there because of the different players we had, but ultimately the profiles just aren't matching up to what we need. And neither of them are doing that singular job of defensive role good enough. And we're now seeing Bergvall come in and look like the best one.
I think that's quite key in terms of, I think Ange likes to have them different profiles, and I think we've got none of them are a specialist in any of them. Do you know what I mean? Like I don't see. Is Bentancur a 6? Is he an 8? He's definitely not a 10. I think he does some stuff for the 6 role well. He does some stuff for the 8 well. So that's why I think we said about the double pivot. I think them two in a double pivot, potentially we're talking about something a bit different.
I mean, we're seeing Jay here mention Højbjerg. I don't know, missing Højbjerg around Aurier crazy, by the way, Jay. That's literally down. You couldn't get any more down bad, Jay. I'm not even sure Aurier even has a club right now. I'm pretty sure Aurier is still a free agent. That's how bad he is.
The Højbjerg thing, I think we miss the characteristics of a Højbjerg.
Yes.
I think, you know, we sound like last season, for instance. If we had a Højbjerg this year, someone who's barely not from what I remember, not really out injured that often, played consecutive, 50 odd games consecutively. If you even just bringing him off the bench as the last like 25 minutes to kind of see a game out, we just don't have that. And that's why if I'd have known last year that we was going to get rid of Højbjerg and not bring in anyone, I would have said, well, he's the kind of caliber player that we're keeping. Do you know what I mean? That's not acceptable. You can't be. He got us so many points and got us over the line so many times last year because with that experience. And then you get rid of it and don't bring anything in. It's just, I just find it so strange how this squad has been put together and then left, and it's almost like it still needs another window or two to kind of move it all around. I don't actually think a lot of the signings have been that, like, there's a couple that have been bad, but most of them have been pretty all right. There needs to be more. Do you know what I mean?
That's it. Again, like, all right's not good enough for Spurs. Like, let's have it right. Where we want to be, all right's not good enough. You need to be top. Like,
yeah. And this is why that change, the change for Spurs, that's exactly why I think that's what it's about. That something needs to change in terms of we need to take that extra step. You need to go that extra bit. And then even like we'll probably discuss it, but transfers and things. When we signed Ndombele, there was Guimaraes there as well. They were both there as a midfield, and we get that one, and that one goes and does that, and this one goes and does this, and that seems to be the way. But we can't keep using that as an excuse. Every single time we've spent big money, it's been terrible. You're not going to get every signing right, but you shouldn't be.
That's actually mad when you think about it, because even we went to Everton and took Richarlison, whilst Newcastle got Anthony Gordon, and look at that right now, bro.
There's so many, but then there is that hindsight. Someone said it in the chat about signing a player from a relegated club, and I think he was probably mentioning about Odebear, but you can't sign players from relegated clubs and kind of celebrate. But for everyone that's like that, I think Odebear's been all right. I think he's been quite good. But then I'm still hearing people tell me that we should go and get Salah-Diblin. So there has to be balance to it. That you can't. Van Dijk was signed from Southampton. Robertson was signed from Hull. So it's not that you can't go and sign players. It's that you can sign the right ones, and you can sign ones that can go up a level. But we don't seem to do that. And I think that a lot of the recruitment for a long time has been poor. I mean, you're talking about like squad management and things. We go into a Europa League season where we can't register 25 players because we haven't got 2 homegrown players, and it's just a crazy. And that's way before Ange. This is the top people in the club. Yeah, and how are you supposed to? There's so many different facets of this club that is struggling and that hasn't been done correctly. and it's almost all coming to a head now. And I don't see how any other manager that comes in who's not going to get backed is still going to have a terrible medical department, is still not going to get the signings they want. Is still, I just don't understand how people think this is just going to all of a sudden we get this manager in and it all works wonders and it's perfect. I just don't see it happening.
No, it's definitely not. I think, like I said, there's so many leaks in this pipe right now that we've got a lot of holes to patch up. We got a lot to get round to, but it's just where do you start? Before we move on from the Fulham game and just the result and everything like that, we're going to talk about just the upcoming what could be for Spurs in this summer transfer window. I want to know your thoughts, your personal thoughts on this video that's been going around. We saw this is after the game. For context, for those that don't know, after the Fulham game, and it's been approached by some of the away fans in the stand. Let me just play the video for you. Oh, let me just turn it up a little.
I don't think you can hear it. I think basically the fan turns around and says, "What was that?" And then Ange kind of gives it back to him, innit?
Yeah, essentially that. He gives it back and he tells him, quite frankly, what, like, you're right, mate. Like, he's trying to give it back, and I'm just like, bro. And this isn't the first time he's done this season. Surely you agree that that's not a good look for a manager, like after a loss, but just especially after what happened with Tell in the stands as well. Like, because Tell was doing the more humble thing, like, let's be together, not give it back, because we know there were some questions about what Vicario had done to the away fans. Like, there's been a lot of this going around, and there's potentially some like back and forth with players and fans and stuff like this. But Tell done a really good job. Like, no, look, guys, everything's good. I'll come and talk to you. Then Ange sort of makes it look even worse with this interaction. What's your thoughts on everything? This whole interaction.
I think he's let himself down here, to be honest with you. There's a lot of stuff that I see fans say to Ange, and I've always said that people pay their money, they pay their hard-earned cash to go there. And when there's a bad performance, they're entitled to boo. They're like, but some of the stuff that's been labelled at Ange and some of the stuff that people have been saying about him, I think it oversteps a mark. But what this guy said, just what was that? It wasn't a personal jibe. It wasn't a personal attack. It was just, why have we been served that up again, sort of thing. And I think he's let himself down. I think he's as I say, some of the other stuff, I've seen some of the videos where he's coming across and people are calling him X, Y, and Z, and it's very personal. And if he's responded to that, I've always said you can't just shout whatever you want at people and not expect a reaction. They are humans at the end of the day. But when it was something so, it wasn't an attack. I think he's let himself down there. And I don't think it's ever a good look. I never look at a manager and go, I'm glad he's done that, or anything like that. But sometimes I can understand it. But with that one, it was baffling. It kind of wasn't really out of much. I'm sure he would have heard a lot worse things said to him that he hadn't reacted to. So it was a very, very strange one, that one.
Yeah, it was. It was a strange one. I think massively let himself down here. It's not a good look for him. It's not a good look for the club. Probably gonna have to apologize or something, because these interactions are happening far too often for Ange. But DB 1981, big up Jords and everyone online. 70 likes and 9 online is amazing, folks. By any chance, if anyone hasn't hit it yet, let's get 4 more to match the years to when Arsenal last won the Premier League. I big up to DB 1981 working overtime Liverpool right now, because their club obviously lost the final. He's trying to do up deflections, Captain America, and get everyone focusing on Arsenal. But big up to JM42. Hi, Jords, Wagwan, Sam as well. Final thoughts going into the end of the season, and also beyond the season, what is needed for Spurs. Let's just focus on the, I suppose, Europa League hopes. I don't have hope. I'm just throw out there right now, guys. If you haven't heard me say it enough, I don't think we'll win the Europa League anymore. I know I've said it quite a bit, but I generally don't think we are going to win Europa League anymore. Luke, do you think Ange Postecoglou can get the job done and in many people's eyes save his job, but I suppose in everyone's eyes saves the season?
I think they're definitely capable. I actually think that a couple of the weaker teams like Olympiacos going out, that's a hostile environment. Obviously, we seem to struggle a little bit in that sort of atmosphere. Galatasaray are the same. I think we're definitely capable. I think that playing away the second leg is more difficult. I think everyone was getting a bit carried away when they said that we was on the easier side of the draw. I think that the other side was good teams against good teams, whereas our side was good teams against average teams. But we was always going to have a difficult route because there was a lot of decent teams in the competition still. So I wouldn't be I'd be completely surprised, I guess, because of how bad we've played. But if you actually looked at it at the start of the season, I wouldn't be completely surprised if we won it. But therefore, I wouldn't be completely surprised if we went out the next round, to be honest. I think a lot of it does depend on whether their big players step up.
They have to. The big players have to step up in these games. And I think one thing that's been apparent this season is, like I said, in many of these close games where we've only lost by 1 goal, you've needed those big players to do their job and just be the difference makers in those. And especially in a European tie, that's exactly what we're going to need. We can't have an Elfsborg situation when we start relying on, Hotspur away to start producing our goal scorers, because that was a problem. Although they did come through that day and it was amazing to see, it was a problem that we needed to rely on to get us through that game. So let's see.
We need them available. We need the leadership group available. I see a stat the other day, I think it was 2 games ago, that all 4 of them played, and it was the first time they'd all played since the start of October, or the end of October.
In a while.
And that's just, you can't. It's your 4 leaders in your team, in a young team as well. We're not talking about just your normal team, a young team with loads of young players around. And I have a feeling that's one of the reasons Gray hasn't been playing in midfield, because he's got Berval there. He's almost the young one taking on that responsibility. He felt that having 2 of them in there, just maybe there's not enough experience, although there's an argument to say whether Bentancur and Basuma, if their experience is an upgrade or not.
No, you are right. They haven't played together for a long while, and I think within this few weeks, I think the next fixture is around the 10th of April. I think sometime in around that time frame. All the players should be fit, ready, and fresh, barring any setbacks from international duty. We could be looking at going into those games with our best possible Spurs side altogether. So there could be hope. I may be wrong. Going into that first fixture is the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, so we're expected to win that first fixture because we have to. But that second fixture is where the pressure is going to be on, and where you will see the real Spurs, because that's away from home in Europe, where we don't have. Well, we have an absolute dreadful record. Let's have it right. A Twisted Fate says, Jords, the Europa League is United if we get past Lyon, please. Europa League is definitely not United. You guys still have some way to go. You still got some teams to beat. Please get the job done against Lyon, and then we can talk about semi-final if we're in there. Maybe we might meet you. But apart from that, Man United fans that are getting gassed about Lyon already trying to celebrate. Again, it was a very close game against Real Sociedad. So take a step back. Through that first round. What was you going to say though, Luke?
No, I think people also forget what you just said about the away form in Europe. I mean, people seem to think that we were a monster in Europe before Ange Postecoglou. Conte lost to Mora away, and Mourinho lost to a team whose manager was in prison. So, this is some of the arguments that I see where I get we're in the worst in terms of league position where we are and everything else, but no one's dealt with the injuries that we've had. And if they had, then I think we'd have struggled. But this isn't like a City where we've been winning everything and then all of a sudden now we've dropped off. Do you know what I mean? As I say, we lost to Mora away. We got knocked out of the Conference League. Everyone tells me Conte's a winner and he wins things and everything else, and yet we went out of the Conference League. So I know we had a game less and all this, that, and the other, but it doesn't matter. If you'd have said at the start of the season you play 1 game less in the Conference League, everyone would have gone, yeah, that's all right, because we'll win every game we play in it. Do you know what I mean? So it's just like there has to be some sort of balance, and that's one of my big things, is that when I see the options that are around, I don't fancy them. I think that Areola will come in and it will improve us in certain aspects, but I don't think he improves us in all aspects. His physicality in terms of how he plays, how intense he plays, he's been dealing with as many injuries as us, but hasn't played every 3 days. So if he comes to Spurs and then we're in Europe and he plays every 3 days, I don't see there being a huge difference in terms of what happens. Frank, I don't think is a Spurs manager. I feel like he's in a way probably too adaptable. I don't think people will be massively happy with his kind of setup, and I think they've even conceded more goals than us this year as well. And And then Marco Silva, I just feel like there's no proof that any of these three come in and actually massively improve us. I think that they've done well in parts, but then you could throw that Postecoglou finished 5th last year. So there's some positives with all of them, and then there's also some negatives with all of them as well. I see a Xavi in the chat, but
yeah, that's the name I've thrown out there quite a bit, Xavi. But no, just like you've alluded to there, and that's what I was actually going to put for the question. So it's good, yeah, you touched on that. Is because we've seen today that all the news has come out. Typical of international break. To be fair, they start briefing all this news on Monday. You know, Spurs are looking, Spurs are briefing, Spurs are talking, Spurs are interested. All of this rubbish is coming out about Marco Silva and Iraola, which I think was always going to be. I think many Spurs fans said, like myself, 4 or 5 months ago, I said if they're going to start looking at managers within the Premier League, it's probably only right they start looking at managers like Fulham's and Bournemouth, because they, for one, they both play attacking football. They're both shown to coach above their level. There is some questions regarding Iraola. I don't question him as a manager, but more with regards to his football. Don't know if it's sustainable as a Tottenham team. A lot of his teams and a lot of his goals come within the transition. I'd love to see how he plays when his team's not consistently in the transition and he's playing against low blocks, because I don't fancy them as much, though they are still a good team and they are being coached well. I'm just not too sure about that, but Marco Silva's an interesting one. Again, a manager who has always been willing to jump ship. He's been at a few Premier League clubs, and we've seen him experience. We've seen him have poor times. We've seen him have good times. You've seen the up and down with him. So again, I'd understand why some fans may want him or may not want him. But one thing that did come out today, I'm not sure if you saw. Let me quickly share my screen again. I did see this tweet come out. Don't know how right or true it isn't. Is apparently from TBR Sport. Daniel Levy has met Ange Postecoglou and told him Tottenham expect to qualify for Europe as a minimum requirement for this season, or he could be looking at having his job on the line. So with that, what do you think? Do you think that? Do you think it's true, or no? It's going to be the season review.
I mean, there's so many if buts and maybes with the Europe, because I see something today where, and this is an extreme case, but if everyone wins their competitions, so it was something like if Villa won the Champions League, we won.
Oh, I saw it could go down to the 11th place, isn't it? Like,
so there is so many stipulations to being in Europe. I mean, if finishing 10th and you get Europe, if that's considered success, then who's to know? But I don't buy into this narrative that the league don't matter anymore. I don't buy into that. I think that if he needs to have a good end to the season. We need to win games. We need to look. I think the performance, if anything, is just as key as the points. If we start performing and we've got the high pressing, because that's my biggest critic recently, is the fact that we haven't really been playing the way Ange sets his teams at. And against Alkmaar, we looked a little bit more like it. If we keep playing to that sort of standard, then that's one question. But if you start playing to the first game of Alkmaar or Fulham, then that's a completely different answer. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think it's a real difficult one. But I think that if we just threw the league and lost, I don't know what 80% of the games left now, even if we get to the final, there still needs to be massive questions. If that's the case, we need to start improving in every aspect of the thing. And then I think it will come down to, regardless, I think it needs to get to the end of the season and it needs to be a review of everything. I can see positives in Ange's football. I can see positives in keeping him. I can see where the team could go in the next few years. But it all needs to be reviewed. And if we're going to go and jump ship and go to someone like a Frank who plays a completely different system, then we're just ripping up the whole squad again and starting again. And like, I think there's too much faith placed in Levy that he's going to appoint the right person, because he's proved time and time again that ain't going to be the case. If there was a perfect candidate out there and we knew he was going to go and get him, then I'd be like, all right, cool. But that's not the case. I still think that there might be a thing where he tries to keep Ange for another year, and then Poch is available.
2 seconds, bro.
Yeah, I think top half now is going to be is probably out of reach. I think drawing against Fulham maybe, but losing to them, unless teams completely fall away, I don't see us.
No, you're right. Most definitely right, Jordan. I can't lie. After this game, because I think many Spurs fans are like, you know what, if we get the wins in the Bournemouth and Fulham game, because we're literally shedding the point tally from what they are, we're directly jumping 3 points up on these teams, we could potentially have some hope. These games have put the nail in the coffin. Spurs aren't getting top half. There's no doubt in my... Literally, we're not getting top half, but better yet, let's actually just quickly look at the Premier League table and try to give our predictions of where we're going to land.
The other thing I was going to say about the alternatives. So I went and had just a little look through their fixtures and through their results to see. So Bournemouth were beat by Leicester this year.
Yeah.
Brentford lost to Plymouth.
Yeah.
Wolves beat Fulham, and Ipswich beat Chelsea. So I don't necessarily buy into this thing that, oh, well, if we go and get a manager that's apparently got tactics, we don't get beat against your Ipswiches. I know that there are them three, particularly at the bottom, are kind of... Southampton haven't actually, I don't think, beat anyone of note at all. But the others have beat other teams. So as I say, Iriola's got beat by Leicester. Frank's lost to Plymouth, and then Marco Silva's lost to Wolves. So this isn't like, again, you go and sign a decent manager and you never lose a team that's lower than you in the table. Then that's just not.
I think, to be fair, this Premier League season is just one of those where you're going to have, like, you could potentially see 3 or 4 teams within that top 7, 8 having double digits defeats, which is just crazy in general, because the Premier League, usually the top 6 have about 5, 6, maybe 7 defeats at max. But now Nottingham Forest in third have 7, put Chelsea in fourth with 8. Man City are on the verge of having 10 defeats in the Premier League, which is nuts itself. But Spurs are in 14th place. I thought it was 15th. Or we're joint 15th and 16th. Technically, like we're all joined in the same position.
Don't be dropping us down. We don't need to go down any further. Go as high as we can.
But Crystal Palace are 5 points clear of us. We've played a game more than them. Brentford are 7 points clear of us. So that, I think it's fair to say, we're definitely not getting above Brentford, don't you think? With 7 points clear, it's going to be a very tight. Even though they've been in a good run of form, it's probably too much to cut down, especially because we got like Chelsea away, we've got Liverpool away. We got not Aston Villa and West Ham away. We still got Aston Villa to play though. We still got Crystal Palace to play. We've still got Nottingham Forest to play. Majority of the teams we're playing, correct me if I'm wrong, are all above us, barring Southampton game. I think we've got a Southampton game and Wolves game. Southampton and Wolves. Yeah, Southampton and Wolves are in there. West Ham is in there, but they're in and around the same. But every other team we're playing are quite significantly above us, so it's going to be tough. Fair to say that Spurs could. I don't think we'll finish any higher than 12.
But that's I think when we discussed this, I think when Elijah was on, that he said that the quality of the Premier League is not up to the level, and yeah, I get where he's coming from, but I think it's more competitive. So we've got 10 games left, and if you read out 10 games, eight would say are tough games. I mean, that's half. Like, do you know what I mean? That's 8 out of 10. Yeah. That's a lot of games. Like, if you're in this sort of run, you're in this sort of fixtures, and every game is going to be difficult. I mean, if we was in a moment where we were Nottingham Forest in third, for instance, you might be looking at certain games going, "No, West Ham, we should go there. We can do this, we can do that," or Fulham, we can go and do this. But all of a sudden, you're in the run that we are, and you're thinking, "Well, anyone could turn us over." So all of the fixtures then become this extra bit. But I think that we've got a lot of them. A lot of the games are difficult. I think we're gonna, depending on where they fall in the calendar, if we're playing in quarterfinals, semi-finals, that sort of thing, that will play into it. And that's why I say that maybe the results they need to be better. They do, but I think the performances are just as key. Even if we don't play the football, we play poorly but win, I don't think that's really going to satisfy that people will go in to go, ANGE should be here next year. Do you understand what I'm saying? The performance need to be there as well. So it's a big end to the season. As if you throw away that league, then you can't be pinning everything on a knockout tournament. You just can't. You can't do that.
Well, we're gonna have to see. We're gonna have to see how the league does end up. We're gonna have to see how it does play out. As we said, fortunately for us as Spurs fans, we do have a few weeks where there's no football. Well, I say about 12, 13 days. We've got 12 or 13 days where there's no football to look forward to. But when we do come back, we've got a big game. Chelsea away, Stamford Bridge. That is not a pretty stomping ground for us. But we'll go into that stuff a lot closer to the time, because right now I'm just gonna enjoy some time away from Spurs. Naturally, gonna enjoy some. Oh no, we do have more than 2 weeks. I've seen we're not even playing on the weekend that football returns.
Oh no, is it not midweek? We're the midweek afterwards.
No, we're the midweek. We're midweek game. Yeah. We're playing on a Thursday again. So we got Thursday, Sunday, Chelsea and Southampton. So we know that we've got longer than 2 weeks. Tottenham fans, we can chill. We can take a rest. We've not got to watch our team.
You said international weekend. All I heard was unbeaten for 2 weeks. That's it.
Right. Some people can take it up. That's the ANGE in him speaking. That's the ANGE in him. The positivity coming out. But you know what, Luke? Where can the people find you? When are you going to finally release a video on Spotlight on Spurs? Because we've been waiting.
I'm hoping the second week of the international break. I'm hoping to release the first sort of video, and then we'll go from there, doing weekly videos, just spatting my nonsense on Spurs, putting the spotlight on Spurs, and analysing, trying to get my band of Anginas in, and we'll go from there. But I'm on Twitter, and as I say, relatively new to the kind of like voicing my opinion on Spurs, if you like. I've always voiced it behind the screen, but now it's time to do it on screen. So we'll see how many people disagree with me.
No, to be fair, you make good points. Like, as much as we may disagree on some things, I think some of the points you make and the way that you do defend ANGE, it's justifiable, innit? It's reasonable, and I've been there. So I'm probably the wrong person to present the ANGE out argument, because I was ANGE in for a lot of the season. So people can't immediately go, Jords, you're not even allowed to say it. I'm like, nah. Naturally, I changed my mind, but I understand why people are there and why they're still there, innit?
I get it as well, and I actually think there's a lot more that actually both sides agree on than anything else. I think they don't realize it. It's just so focused on anything that says about him has to be this or so. And as I say, the whole you're not allowed to you're not allowed to celebrate if we win the trophy if you're ANGE out. That's just like, we at the end of the day, we all support the same team. We all want the team to be successful. And obviously, ANGE out people think that. I think I posted this on Twitter as well. ANGE out believe that if we get rid of Postecoglou, we'll have a better chance of doing that. That's it. That's the bottom line.
That is all it is, literally.
We've got a better chance of especially when all the players are backing him. I feel like you get rid of him, and all of a sudden some players start going, nah, do you know what? I ain't having like, let's say, the 3 options in the Premier League. None of them have ever won anything. So why would Romero, as a World Cup winner, start listening to someone who's finished 10th and 12th but done a good job? Do you know what I mean? So I try and be a little bit of balance. I try not to get too overhyped with anything, but I'm just gonna stay Angin because people just hate it. It's quite funny.
I generally thought I was gonna be that guy. I said it, you know what? Because there was a point in like December where I was starting questionable. I was like, you know what, fuck it. I'm Angin anyway. I'm here for the ride. And when people would say, I remember there was times they're going, oh, look, Ange doing bad, then we'd win. I'd be like, hey, my manager, rub it in their face a little bit more, because it is funny. They hate it. They do hate it. And now I'm a part of their crowd. I've joined. I'm like, you know what? I ain't even going to get it. I'm not even going to entertain it. But we have actually quickly just had some news from Mr. Udang before we wrap up. Fabrizio Romano says there's been no talk of Ange Postecoglou being sacked from any sources close to the club, with Daniel Levy's focus to help his head coach progress in the Europa League. At the moment, Tottenham's full focus is on the present, especially the Europa League, as a crucial target for Spurs this season. Nothing else coming from sources close to the club. So everything you have seen coming out regarding Iraola, regarding Marco Silva, is what, to be fair, many of us thought it would be. It's just start of the international break. They're starting to brief the news. They're starting to get the stuff out because they need stories ultimately. But the board has given Ange his full backing, and he probably will get till the end of the season now.
No manager worth their weight's going to come now, is there? If like, let's just say they went, right, we're going to go for Iraola, and he comes to us, then I'll be sitting there thinking, as soon as Barca come in, as soon as Real Madrid come in, he's gone. Like, he's not even going to worry about it, is he? Because why would you leave a team when there's like 8 games left of the season?
Yeah.
So the only way that works is if they bring a caretaker in. Mason is the fans are not going to have. So I think he's here regardless.
That's literally the only way it's going to work is if they bring in. And the only way I could see Mason getting the control is if after Europa League, if we get knocked out, Ange could potentially resign. He could just do the we part ways because it doesn't look bad. After what he come out and said at the start of the season, it's gonna look horrible. But Ryan Mason seeing out at the end of the season would be typical Levy fashion, and I think it would send some fans literally to the edge. It'd send some of them to the edge seeing Ryan Mason on the touchline again.
If that happens, I'm Mason in. I'll just tell you that.
Are you sure? We might have found the person finally behind Invert the Wing. It might be the guy behind Invert the Wing. Lucas finally come out and decided to show his face. Ryan Mason, 2026. All the way. I did see that tweet from him. I was like, it's crazy. But big up to everyone. Make sure you've liked the video if you haven't already. If you're still tuned in, big up to you. You are a real one. We've had loads of people in the building. Twisted Fate, Jordan, Sam, Boris, Jay Simpson. They've kept the chat live all show. And I'm sorry I haven't interacted with it too much, but we've had a real good conversation. So it's one that I wanted to really just keep diving into, going into the topics so you guys could follow along. But yeah, man, show some love on Spotlight on Spurs. Subscribe over there if you haven't already, and be prepared for when Luke starts releasing his ANGE propaganda. Big up to everyone. We're out. Peace.
I didn't get as much hate as I thought.